Kath gets back, we'll get started. Do we have a quorum?
No. Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah, we've got
working.
got a lot going on.
7 of our 10 here. Okay, good.
Steph was grabbing the sandwich.
Another nice high resolution.
Oh, good, I just called it, so,
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
Just printed
That
right
is
off
very
of
true.
our, Oh, okay. Yeah, GIS.
Recording stopped.
Hey, Greg. How you doing?
Probably, but I can't see well enough to say. Yeah.
I think so. I think,
Do you need to plug into something?
no, it's fine. I just don't have any battery life, so if we need to go from the computer, we can't. I used it all.
Okay, I will officially call the meeting to order. Welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Manchester Housing Task Force. This is a group that will be ultimately accountable to the Planning Commission. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and I really appreciate all of your participation in this. This is, I would say, probably, if we had to single out an issue in town right now, this is the single most pressing issue that we face. Obviously, there are a lot of issues that we face, but this is probably the most pressing one. To the audience, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for coming. I would ask that the audience, since this is an organizational meeting, we're going to be taking care of the order of business and how we actually run future meetings and the kinds of things that we get into, that we would, you are up here, sir. We are going to hold questions and comments from you folks until the end, okay? And then we will certainly be willing to take questions and comments at that point. We just want to get through the business part of this first meeting. The background on this whole thing is really started with Kath and Seth and me trying to co-sponsor a housing forum that took place back in late October to raise the importance of this issue to the town. And it certainly was important to the town. This entire room was filled with people, and some of you folks were probably here. And so far, since that late October meeting, there's been a lot of talk in town, social media and in other places, about housing and the need for housing. People are certainly opinionated about housing. But I think what we can all agree on is that based on the Manchester Business Association survey that John did, based on the other kinds of input that we've received, that housing, whether it be owner-based or rental-based, is critically needed in town. And so our ultimate goal, I mean, the ultimate purpose of the Housing Task Force is to use the various opportunities that we have in Manchester with respect to land ownership, relationships with those current owners, the zoning ordinance that's in place, support infrastructure along the lines of water and sewer and so forth, and then federal, state, and local assistance programs to create attractive, practical housing that's affordable, and affordable can mean a lot of different things, obviously. And as we get into future meetings, we're going to talk about what affordability means. The state has one definition, the feds have another definition. In town, we might have another definition, and then we all have opinions about what affordability means. But that ultimately, any housing that we get to, and what we really want to do is, this group's mission is to get to shovel-ready housing projects to serve Vermonters who want to live in Manchester. So if you want to live in Manchester, we feel that you ought to have an opportunity to live in Manchester. Okay? Meetings. There was some comments about the meeting time today, noon. It's an unusual meeting time, admittedly. Normally, we hold our Planning Commission and Design Advisory and Development Review Board and Select Board meetings in the evening for a reason. That's when people are off from work and that's when they can make it. The reason that we held this one at noon is because Kath and Seth are in Montpelier all the rest of the week, working hard for us, and we wanted to accommodate them. And I figured that noon today was better than, say, 2 or 3 o'clock when people have to go back to work, or in the morning when they're already at work, okay? So, not an ideal time, but all of this is going to be recorded, so anybody that's interested in town can certainly view the videotape, okay? That's enough for me for right now. What I'd like to do is have everybody introduce themselves and just talk a little bit about why you were interested in applying to be on this group, what you bring to the table, that kind of thing. Can we start with you, Kath?
Yeah, so thanks to everybody who volunteered, and thanks to all the folks who are here today. I'm State Rep Kathleen James, and along with Seth, he and I represent our 2-seat district, the Bennington 4 district, in the Vermont House of Representatives. So Bennington 4 is Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, and half of Sunderland. I was first elected in 2018, so I'm in my 3rd term now. And this year in the legislature, I am serving as Assistant Majority Leader. But most relevant to this, and the reason why I wanted to be on this task force, is that I'm now ranking member of the Housing Committee, the House General and Housing Committee. So there are 2 committees up in the legislature that have primary responsibility for housing. The committee I serve on and the committee that Seth serves on. So I'll let him talk about his committee in a minute. The General and Housing Committee tends to be the committee that stands up, implements, and funds big programs. So you'll see the VHIP program that we'll talk about, I'm sure, during these meetings. That comes through my committee. Funding for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which works with partners to build affordable housing all over the state. That comes through the committee that I sit on. Things like short-term rentals, landlord-tenant laws, that's the jurisdiction of the committee that I've just been newly assigned to. So the reason I wanted to serve on this task force was to serve as a liaison between the work that we're doing locally here and the work that the legislature is doing, to make sure that we're always kind of in the know about bills that are coming through, programs that are being funded, and making sure that we always have that pipeline to, who do we need to talk to about the Vermont Housing Finance Agency? So I'm here to participate, of course, in whatever way is helpful, but I am, in my mind, envisioning a really important sort of liaison role. And I do want to take a sec just to thank everybody. As Phil said, this is a very weird and inconvenient time for a meeting. I think we all felt it was really important that we try to do this first meeting in person. And unfortunately, during the legislative session, the only business day that Seth and I are in town is Mondays. And so not an ideal thing going forward. I know that we can participate on Zoom as we move forward, so I'm hoping that we find a better time for our regular meetings, and just want to thank everybody for being here today on a Monday at noon, so that we could all get together and be in the same room, at least this first time. Enough for me, more than enough for me, actually.
Hello, I'm Kevin Nielsen, and I've lived in this area nearly my whole life. Went to grade school at MES, and up in Danby at Curry Memorial, and attended Burn Burton. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been a lot of places in the world, and this is my favorite. But the reason I wanted to get on this housing task force is this has been a problem in this area for over 25 years. I mean, I've been a carpenter my whole life, and I've worked with people that travel an hour every day to come to this town to work, to build houses in this town. They just can't afford to live here. I lived in Rupert for a long time, built my own house, and then in Dorset. But I since have been renting after getting divorced about 10 years ago. And I rejoined this task force because of when people don't have shelter, when people's shelter are at risk, It is a huge, huge stress on these people. And as far as, there's been a lot of talk about mental health lately, since the pandemic, but having your housing in jeopardy, not being able to afford shelter, is a major cause of depression. It's high stress, depression. These people have to have multiple jobs, functioning under a stressful situation. I think that it's a nationwide health epidemic, and this is an aspect of housing that nobody's talking about, and that's why I'm here. I personally went through the cycle of having my housing in jeopardy, going into depression, moving several times before I found housing that's stable for me, and that cured my depression almost instantly. So I went through this for a year and a half, so this is why I'm here. I got some experience on the health aspect of unstable housing.
Thank you. John?
Hi, I'm John Burnham. I'm the Executive Director of the Manchester Business Association. I've been in that role for about 2.5 years, been part of the Manchester Business Association since its formation in 2016. I do have to give more credit to Kathleen, who actually put the Survey Monkey together that we sent out to our member businesses back last fall that gave the results that some of you have seen and they talked about at that actual forum. I'm here to represent 130 member businesses just from that perspective, which they go from small mom and pop, 1 or 2 employers to some of our larger employers in the area. And all, as you saw, if you saw those results, are struggling with the same thing. Short-term, long-term, meaning summer housing, long-term housing, year-round housing. I moved here in 2015 and opened the Taconic Hotel, and I can tell you every year, whenever we hired a manager to come and move here, it was so tough to find them housing. So it existed then, it's existed for a while, and I think we can come up with some really interesting solutions. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Judd Hoffman. I grew up in the area, went to BBA, class of 08, and now I currently work for a pharmaceutical company doing sales training. See your sweatshirt, Biogen, that's actually the company I work at. So,
I know my wife, man.
Okay. So we work to bring major depressive disorder and postpartum depression medications to patients. So that's currently what I'm doing. But having a lot of friends in the area that are expanding their families and looking to buy housing, it's been such a challenge. And my wife and I were very fortunate to have found a house back in town and have recently purchased it, but I know not everyone has been in the same situation. So really wanted to also be a representative for just looking around maybe at the younger end of the spectrum on residents in the town.
Great.
Hello, everyone. My name's Victoria Silsby. I've been fortunate to live in Manchester for 28 years. I grew up in Bennington County. I wasn't born in Vermont, but I grew up. And my husband and I were fortunate. We were renters for 8 years in Dorset on Morse Hill Road, and then had the opportunity as a young couple to purchase a house when our first child was fairly young. And I'm still in the house. And I can't imagine where I would be if I didn't have that house. My husband and I, over the years, talked about we certainly wouldn't be in Manchester if we didn't have the opportunity to buy the house we bought 28 years ago. I'm not even sure we'd be in Bennington County. I'm the prevention specialist at the Collaborative, and we prioritize housing as one of the technical terms of social determinants of health. So to my table mates and committee member, co-committee members, housing is almost the #1 social determinant of health. There's also yeah, I could go on. I could monopolize why I'm here, but I think it's important, and I feel strongly about being able to give back, both personally with my experience and hopefully professionally.
I'm Gordon Black. I'm the municipal assessor for the town of Manchester. So I spend all day, every day, studying properties and studying the sales prices of properties in Manchester. So I'm keenly aware of the problem here, and it's certainly a problem. I'm also the economic development coordinator, which is an interesting hat to wear. But as John knows, as everybody knows, we really have to have workforce housing. I won't even use the word affordable housing, just housing for people who work here to actually live here. Even here in the town, I'm not sure there's a single police officer who lives here in town. At least 90%, if not higher, of the people who work for the town can't afford to live here or find housing very hard to get. So this is a topic I've been working on, or at least cooperating with various developers over the years, and just wanted to continue to do that.
I'm Ed Morrow. My wife and I came here in '76 to start the North Shire Bookstore. And almost, well, we moved across the street from where we were on Main Street to the Colburn Inn when we renovated that. And at that point, we needed more employees, and this was in the middle '80s, and housing was a problem then. I served on the Planning Commission for 8 years. And just before I served on the Planning Commission, I remember housing surfacing as a problem in the community, and Stan Zecker, a name some of you will remember, had some unfortunate comments to make about where our low-cost housing was. But it elevated the issue for a short while. It was always an issue for us. A majority of our employees lived out of town, some of them traveling an hour and a quarter to get to the store. And it became more and more of an issue up until very recently, when we were looking for an executive director who agreed to come and spent 2 months looking for a home here and then didn't come. That happened, that same phenomenon happened with J.K. Adams and several other firms that I know. So that's beyond low-cost housing. It's been a problem for decades, and every year I see it getting worse. It's a serious societal problem nationwide, and it hits us in a very real way here. And that's why I'm on the committee, very interested in trying to solve it.
Hi, well, my name is Melanie Johnson. I've lived here about 25 years. We've rented for many of those years prior to being able to buy a home. The neighborhood that we are in was where they were thinking of developing that town property, and that's how I got involved with the housing project. I am also with the Vermont Country Store, where we have tried to hire many people and unable because they couldn't find housing here. It's been a huge problem. Getting people, you know, especially young people that can't afford to be here. So, you know, that's why I'm here.
Representative Seth Baumgartz. I am Kathleen's counterpart. And as Kathleen mentioned, I'm on the other committee that deals with housing. I suppose others do as well, but we're the two main committees that deal with housing. I'm on the Environment and Energy Committee, and my committee deals with regulation, be it the Agency of Natural Resources, be it municipal zoning and planning, or Act 250, or any of the levels of regulation. Any changes come through my committee, and I have spent a lot of my time since going back to the legislature in 2020 focused on housing. And I have focused on, because it's the area I know the best, I've focused on the regulatory apparatus and trying to make it easier to build housing in downtowns. I think a couple of things here. One is that Vermont is probably the most climate resilient state in the country, and is therefore going to be under tremendous pressure as a climate haven. It's already started, and now when I use no turn pressure, let me flip that around and say there's also a major opportunity in there. Because the opportunity is to plan for it, know that it's coming, plan for it, and make sure that as more houses are built, that we do it in a way that actually improves the vitality of our communities, and that means building in downtowns, frankly. The alternative is farmland and forest land and sprawl. So the goal, from my way of thinking, is to for towns to build much more dense housing in downtowns. We have to do it in a way that fits the realities of each town and what each town wants. But if we're gonna solve the housing problem here and elsewhere, that's where I believe it has to be. And I guess the other thing is, as a resident, somebody who lives here, I care about the people who live here, and I care about the people I grew up with, and not having a hard time being able to live here now, and everybody else. And a real community, of course, has the full range. People of all incomes deserve to have the ability to live in downtowns where there's walkability and access to services. And a real community has the full range of income levels and the full range of people living in all parts of the community. And that's what I really want to see happening. So, and it's only going to happen if we make it happen. So, and right now the housing crisis is unbelievably acute in Vermont. The Housing Finance Agency estimate is that just to keep up with the needs of the people who live here and have a little bit of extra stock, we need to build 40,000 units of housing in Vermont in the next 8 years. Some of that, obviously, we hope is going to be here because we're one of the places, especially with the access to sewer and water, where we can do that. But if we do it right, we can help make Manchester that much more vibrant. But it's only going to happen if we make it happen. So this committee, I really think, is important because with the help of the entire community making decisions, either we make decisions or they're going to get made for us. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to make the decisions. So I guess that's enough. And I'm here to be the liaison as well, same as Kathleen said.
I'm Leslie Hare, interim town manager, and I am not a part of the task force. So enjoy your meeting.
Thanks, everyone. A few things, or a couple of comments with respect to this group. This group contains some folks who were on the so-called Depot Street project group that's been referred to by a few of you. The Depot Street group was formed to try to figure out what we were going to be doing with a parcel of town-owned property that is just across the street, that parcel of property back where little strip mall, Pendleton is back there, Carter's is back there, the two big buildings out front. And there were some solutions that were proposed for a variety of reasons. They didn't go anywhere. We have now put out an RFP for ideas around how to develop that area. And I believe that those are due by the 15th, right, Leslie?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and we will be, at our Planning Commission meeting tonight, we'll be reviewing any RFP responses that have come in. But I think it's important because I'll be out there with it. There was some cynicism around the Depot Street group's deliberations and where it ended up. And there was some finger pointing, and frankly, I don't think that does anybody any good as to why there was no final solution developed and brought to the table. But that's water under the bridge at this point. This group, as reformulated, is meant to back up and take a fresh approach to every single potential parcel of property in town. It's also meant to take a fresh approach with respect to potential solutions. The the kinds of housing that we could put up, how those comport with the zoning regulations. What do we need to do about sewer and water? So I think it gives us a fresh slate in deliberating the issue, and I think it also gives us a lot more options as well, rather than being constrained to looking at one property. The other thing I want to do is just review some of our governance issues before we move forward, okay? We use, because this is a task force that is accountable to the Planning Commission and is supported wholeheartedly by the Select Board, to which the Planning Commission is accountable, we all use the same rules of order. We basically use Robert's Rules of Order. Fortunately, we never have to get into Robert's Rules of Order in great detail, but I actually carry it around on my Kindle. It was $3, okay? So, and usually you can use the abbreviated version of it. So if you're interested, it may be worth it, worth looking at it. It's without getting into the rarefied aspects of it. But the other thing is meetings, the dates, the times, the agendas, and so forth. I will be backing out after this meeting, so I will not be on the group. I think it defeats the purpose for the group to which you're accountable to be part of the decision-making, the deliberation process. So it will be up to you folks to set your own meetings, set your agendas. I would encourage you to have meetings at least once a month. In the nearer term, it may be required for you to meet more often, if it's possible, okay? Just to develop some momentum around some of the conversation pieces that you're, and issues that you're deliberating over. You will need to name, elect officers, essentially, without getting into too much, once again, onerous detail around officers. You need a chair, you need a vice chair, and you need a secretary/clerk, okay? The secretary/clerk will be responsible overall for minutes, and the chair will run the meeting. Obviously, the vice chair, in the absence of the chair, will run the meetings. And send out agendas ahead of time. Robert's rules basically say, well, actually, no, this is state law that says we have to warn public meetings and get agendas posted 48 hours ahead of time, okay? Just for the record. Okay, any questions around that? I figured what we would do is do elections at the end of this meeting, just to give everybody a sense of who's who, and you know who you feel is best placed to be put in officer positions. And I will not be a voting member as part of that process. So let's move forward with the task force mission. Okay, I think it's always good, even though it can, you know, when you write down stuff, you know, strategies and goals and mission statements and all that stuff, it can kind of be lost in the conversation, and people can kind of forget what goals and mission statements you set. But I do think it's good to just memorialize that stuff so that you always have something, the fundamentals to fall back on in deliberating over the issues. So I wrote down what I believe the purpose of this group is to be. It's a little bit long in the tooth. Hopefully you won't fall asleep as I read it. And then you can take it and do whatever you want with it. You can form your own, you can amend this. But what I did was I tried to be as inclusive as possible in what we're trying to do without throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, into this thing. To find, procure, research, design, and build housing that is affordable to a large segment of population of Vermonters who want to live, work, and play in Manchester, with a focus on multi-family housing opportunities in the town core and surrounding permissible areas, permissible based on the zoning ordinance, okay? But not excluding consideration of single and two-family detached homes, mobile homes, and missing middle homes that might not otherwise be included in the multi-family definition. Missing middle homes are defined, especially if you look on the VHFA site, as being essentially not single or two-family kinds of homes, and not large apartment buildings, but in between, somewhere 1 to 4 units, essentially. So you can do with that what you will. Then there are goals, housing types of places and types and places, the clients that we want, and I just call them clients, the renters, owners, and clients involve neighbors as well to the people that need housing. And then the areas where we can entertain housing opportunities. So what I would do is invite you to invite some discussion right now around some of these things. As you've been thinking about today's meeting, what are some of the goals that you feel that the group ought to have? Gordon.
I just want to say one thing about that is that I think you said "and build." I mean, obviously, we can't build anything. And the best we can do is encourage private landowners to build, or to help find development, or to help recommend maybe some zoning changes, or maybe some conditions that would allow building those houses. But we can't control private property. The town has a couple of pieces of property, and we might be able to do some work with that. But private property, the best we can do is encourage it. So I'm not quite sure how that opening statement is going to deal with that.
Same deal. So somewhere in there, I can't, this statement is in my head right now, but somewhere in there, I think it just needs to become clear that we research, discuss, recommend plans that support the construction of.
Right.
It's a small wording change, but a big diff. And I don't know whether we need to explicitly mention accessory dwelling units in there, since they're kind of a hot topic that is getting funding. And
It's a good ad. Yep.
Could you repeat that? What was?
I just wondered if we need to toss in there somewhere the concept of accessory dwelling units, since that's something that the legislature is, specifically kind of supporting and funding right now through that VHIP program.
And there are programs that help, for instance, landlords and other current owners to establish and improve those,
Yeah, certainly accessory units could make a big difference, a surprising difference, and have made a big difference in many other communities when encouraged. To your point, which struck me immediately too, and build, that hit me, but somebody earlier said something about coming up with a shovel-ready projects, with shovel-ready concepts and projects, and approaching that seems like a worthwhile endeavor, because many things fall in the permitting process, and contractors and builders, investors will look at a project and look at the permitting process and just go elsewhere because it's so much easier elsewhere. So I think we should certainly include the permitting process in our charter.
Any other comments? How about the types of places? How about the types of housing that we're talking about?
Can you read that again?
Well, okay.
Just the types.
My wording was with a focus on multifamily housing opportunities. in the town core and surrounding permissible areas. To back up a second, what we're doing, what we've been doing in Manchester and in a lot of other towns in the state is gravitating towards creating greater density around the downtown area. There are a lot of different reasons for that. We don't need to get into that right now, but essentially it's just ease of access. It's the ability to do quality infill. And multifamily housing is frankly, however you define that, whether it's 1 million units or whether it's 4 units, is really the only way we're going to solve this problem in Manchester. It doesn't mean that we can't obviously enhance housing opportunities and create more stock with some of the other things that I mentioned, like 1 and 2 family detached homes, mobile homes, missing middle, that kind of stuff, accessory dwelling units. But I think multifamily housing, however you guys define that, is going to be the way to try to get at solving this problem. So that's why I said, with a focus on multifamily housing opportunities in the town core and surrounding permissible areas, but not excluding consideration of single and two-family, ADUs, mobile homes, missing middle, that kind of thing.
Can I make a suggestion? In the years that I've helped in businesses that I've worked with develop mission statements in particular, the shorter the better, because then it stays with people and they're able to remember it and apply it when they're in these moments when they don't know if they're going in the right direction or not. Maybe just not list any of the actual opportunities or various housing opportunities. What we're trying, from my understanding, is that we're trying to determine housing opportunities in this area and making, to educate when it comes to certain aspects of programs that are available for folks to develop their current existing units and stuff like that. So there's an education process for our community. There's obviously all the other issues we've been already talking about, and of course advocating for getting these projects done in any way, shape, or form. But I don't think we have to list all the various housing. It's just we're looking to create multifamily housing in this area through whatever resources we have available to us.
I don't think it should be a tax.
I share John's concern because I'm always like, if we make that list, what if we forget something? Or what if that list pigeonholes us into something that we didn't think of 6 months down the road?
Yeah. And as like funding or subsidies or whatever becomes available, whichever route is the most, makes the most financial sense, could be the direction that we want to shift to. So it just keeps us nimble as well.
Yeah, certainly I just threw this on paper for you guys to
That's great.
No, I
toss
appreciate
out,
it. You need a
amend,
we need a
whatever.
starting point.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's your thing to do.
These are good points. If there's anything you learn in the legislature, is that the best way to waste 3 days is to try to build an all-inclusive list.
Yeah.
So, definitely I don't think any of us want to bog down in the mission statement, so.
Right, I didn't mention tiny homes. So you'd have the tiny home contingent come in and say, you forgot about us.
I thought that was included in the accessory dwelling unit, the ADU. I thought tiny homes was part of that, but I was mistaken.
They can be, yeah.
Right?
Not necessarily, but they
Right,
can.
so I think it's best that we not make that list.
Right.
It must feel like what you wrote in the beginning, up to, like, when you say multifamily housing, however that's done, I think that says all we need to focus on, the procurement and all kind of things you had already written.
I'll send this, on that note, I'll send this out to the group. You guys create your own machinations, yeah. Any other, Seth, you look like you have something to say.
No.
Okay.
I was going to add anything to that, it would be to say that we want to focus on low and moderate income housing. That's the area that needs the help.
Maybe we could just talk about the socioeconomic factors involved in being able to live here and what affordability means. It's a hot topic. It's also a charged topic. Obviously, we can talk about it in the context of programs in the state, in terms of AMI, percents of AMI, but it would be interesting to get your folks' take, based on your own personal experience, and how you view the issue at a larger level. Who are the folks that need housing? How do we prioritize? If we want everybody who wants to live here to be able to live here, no matter what their socioeconomic background or status is now, how do we prioritize?
So can I jump in, Victoria? So I read through the 8 documents that you shared with us in those 2 introductory emails, and something that kept resonating with me, the gentleman to my far right next to Kathleen, is when you have employees, friends, maybe family, coworkers that are traveling over an hour to build houses in this community, but they aren't living here. So my question, and I couldn't find it in any of the reports, is, to me, there's potentially a difference between wanting to live here and being able to afford to live here. And that seems right now to be what keeps sticking in my mind, because having lived in Bennington County since, I'll date myself, 65, there's a big difference between wanting to live in Manchester now and being able to afford to live here. And so to your point, or to someone's point about none of the police officers that work for the town possibly living here, is that by choice or is that by affordability? And I'm not sure, because I've heard that data point thrown around a lot over the last year, but I've never asked the law enforcement department, if you could afford to live here, would you? Is it an affordability, or do they choose to live in Wallingford? Do they choose to live in Arlington or Dorset, wherever they're living? I had a decision maker about 6 months ago. I created a scenario to him. One of the spouses in the relationship is the head bank teller, and the other spouse in the relationship is a sole proprietor, contractor, restorer of period homes, and a master plumber licensee. And without batting an eye, the decision maker said, and you would be in affordable housing. So that scenario, a head bank teller of a local bank and someone who owns their own construction business, without batting an eye, the decision maker said, and you would be in affordable housing. That's why I'm here on this committee today.
Okay.
I'll go. So I tend to think in very concrete terms about where we can make the most impact and where we can leverage programs that are already available to build housing. So when I think about areas where we could try to make concrete progress, I think about programs that are already up and running. So, VHCB builds affordable housing all over the state. What if anything, do we need to do to make sure that more of that work happens here in our community? There's the VHIP program. Do we have the right zoning in place? Are we getting the word out to landlords? How can we help property owners put rental units online through VHIP? We've got a missing middle pilot program that we're funding right now. What do we need to do to make sure that local developers know about that program, that they're taking advantage of it? Where could some of those units be built? What creative ideas are out there for businesses that might want to get involved in some workforce housing? I know that comes with pros and cons, but so I don't think in terms of like reinventing the wheel. I think in terms of how can we make sure that our community is leveraging all the dollars that are out there right now and all the programs that are out there right now so that we could put housing in all the right places with pipelines that are already flowing. Are they flowing here? And if not, why not? I know that's a very concrete way to look at it, but
Yeah,
we're going to have to focus.
I know in that regard, one of the things is you can't build affordable housing affordably if you're a developer unless there's infrastructure. So you have to have water and sewer. We are optimistic that we're going to get some help from a grant to extend the sewer out from downtown out to here, to this building, or a little bit beyond, and hopefully capture the mobile home park next door. With that, that allows for development of some of these undeveloped lots you see on the way out here on Main Street. It at least creates the potential, because if you have to build your own private septic, private wells, that really limits what you can do with housing. So we have to extend and expand the infrastructure, whether it's out here on Main Street, whether it's down Richville Road. There's a lot that has to be done, because it's easy to just look on a map and say, well, here's enough, here's a big piece of property. But that doesn't, just because it's a vacant piece of property doesn't mean it's a good place to build housing. Somebody has to be able to build it and at least break even. They're not donating money out of the goodness of their heart, usually just to build affordable housing. So they have to be able to do it, and the town has to be involved in getting infrastructure expanded from what it currently is. And it's not, I can tell you that there are businesses in town with lots of employees who are going the route of buying old mom and pop motels so that they can house their employees. There's been a lot of inquiry about that. And quite frankly, that's the most affordable way for them to have employees and keep them. If employees are driving from Granville or Salem or Bennington in the wintertime, they don't show up, there's a problem. The farther they have to go, the more likely it is there's going to be problems with attendance. And if they can have them nearby in housing or in motels, that's the route they're going to go. And quite frankly, living in a motel is not really ideal. I mean, they're doing it out of desperation at this point. So I don't know that that goes anywhere, but Ed?
In reading over the literature that you provided, I was struck by two things. One, there's an unbelievable amount of money become available. This is a unique opportunity. I've never seen anything like this since I've been in business. If we can come up with the right ideas to produce plans and make them easy to slip into, there's money available to subsidize what's going to have to be subsidized to induce the kind of building we're talking about, because it's not going to happen with private capital. We exchanged the real estate at the North Shire Bookstore for multifamily housing in Rutland. So now I'm a multifamily housing landlord. It's a unique niche in the real estate market. My son Chris and I enjoy being the challenges of being good landlords for people who are on a fixed budget. And it's doable. And there are improvements we want to make to the property. Improvements that were in our initial plans, which we developed close to 2 years ago, and have now gone out the window because of the increase in costs. The increase in construction cost, of repair cost, of plumbing, of heating, have jumped 20 to 30%. And those are astronomical sums. The project we've got, because of construction costs alone, forget the permitting, the infrastructure that's available, whatnot, just pure and simple construction costs for, you already got the property, just putting up a building that meets code, and we want to do perhaps better than code, it has just risen to such a degree that it's really discouraging. So we've got our work cut out for us. but it's absolutely certain that we're going to have to be very creative in accessing some of the funds that we have available for the next maybe 3 years. But there's an enormous amount out there, but we're really going to have to rely on those who know how to access it to guide us into creating programs that will access that, because nothing major is going to happen without it.
It's too bad that Kat's not here, because she would be able to speak directly to that. I mean, that's what she does every day. So, but I'm confident that she will be a good source of information and guidance in that respect. Seth?
We'll just add to what, especially what Gordon was saying. We're going to have to accept housing that looks different. It has to be larger and much more dense than we're used to. And A, we get something done, B, we don't. So we're going to have to prepare ourselves for that and prepare ourselves for housing that looks different. There's a lot we can do to make it fit in. There's a lot we can do to make it look great, but it's going to be different. So we have to be ready to accept that if we want to deal with this issue.
I'd just like to add and endorse that wholeheartedly. As I do my health walks around town, I try to pick new routes. So I know the town pretty well. I walk it every day. I've picked out a number of places where multifamily housing could fit with a little creativity, and where sewers are available. And I understand the efficiencies of multifamily housing are significant, and that's going to be one of my major focuses on this committee. However, Kathleen mentioned accessory units, and we shouldn't be putting blinders on. I've got a bias towards multifamily housing for the community. I think that's the way to go. Nevertheless, we shouldn't just be focusing on something that's going to be a big project, because with the proper zoning, and this has happened in certain other communities, with the proper zoning changes and approaches to how things are taxed and whatnot, regulation, the opportunity for accessory units is just as big as multifamily housing, perhaps bigger. And the investment money to put into it is easier to come by, because if you make it easy for many people who have what could become accessory units, they can finance that if you make it properly. So I think we've got to approach it from both ends.
Let me ask a follow-up question to what you just mentioned. I agree with you. There's a lot of opportunity for ADUs in a variety of respects. I'm not sure that they're not as visible, though, with respect to what you find in the newspaper or in other sources of information, right? And I'm not sure that people even understand what they really are and the forms that they can take. So, given that, how do we do more around, and I wanted to raise this issue in the larger context of communication to the public. This is something Kath and I talked about early on, was making sure that not only on the ground, the deliberations of this group are completely transparent to the community, but specifically around opportunities for enjoying assistance from the government on building an ADU or improving something as a landlord. How do we get that word out? How do we create a campaign, a marketing campaign of sorts, so that we're taking advantage of every possible opportunity out there?
That's going to be an issue for us for sure, but one other corollary to that is the lack of information we have. Gordon and I have already discussed this. The town records don't really tell us who has apartments out there or who has the potential for building apartments. I don't know if do you know how many apartments exist in Manchester? Or do you think you could closely approximate it? No,
not as I sit here right now.
It's not in the records. We got to consider building in better ways to get information about what our infrastructure is.
And I was just going to comment with with what Ed was saying about that, I think this committee, there's two areas of focus in a way on our mission statement, and one would be short-term solutions, which these types of things are what we're talking about, because these are things that if we educate, part of our mission statement, educating our local community and folks that do have accessory dwellings or could potentially build an accessory dwelling on the property to create a one-bedroom rental unit, those are the kind of things that we would go for. That's more short-term. Long-term is the multi-family units, because that's going to take so much more time, not only to flush out where the right place is, but then to go through the process and find, as we talked about, whether it's some private money, public money, whatever it might be, that's a more length of time it will take to do that. So I think there's two approaches we should be taking as a committee, and that's a short-term and long-term approach. Short-term, there's lots of programs out there that we can educate our community about, and there's lots of vehicles for us to get that word out in a different way to our local residents to help them understand these things are there for them to take advantage of and help us. And then there's the long-term solutions we'll be talking about.
It's even more complicated than that. I mean, I agree with you completely, but we haven't even mentioned vacation homes, vacation accessory units. We don't really know how much potential affordable housing has been taken off the market and put into the vacation market. But my guess is it's substantial.
Wasn't there a study, I thought the select board was doing a study on that was due soon or coming out soon?
Still on.
Yeah, the planning commission is contracted with Doug Kennedy. I'm in touch with him. He just got started on a short-term, contained to short-term rentals, not a general seasonal home or vacation home study. That's something that's very different, and it's a larger issue in every part of Vermont, within which short-term rental unit capacity is included. So yeah, Doug Kennedy is, who's also done some other economic studies for us. In fact, one of them was a study he did a few years ago that I sent out to you folks around housing needs in town. So it's a little dated, but it's still fairly relevant. So he'll be doing an economic impact study. That's what we commissioned him to do, an economic impact study around short-term rentals. It won't capture things, as I've testified before to the select board, around quality of life or around transition. In other words, how would a home that's no longer in short-term rental status, if it was no longer allowed to be, how would it transition to being used in a long-term lease situation? So it won't cover any of that kind of stuff. It'll simply be an economic impact study. And then with that, the results of that study, what we'll do is we'll decide whether we need to go further with a more, I guess, heuristic approach on interviewing people and understanding how people would react to a change. Something that's been entertained with respect to short-term rentals is a registry. And there are more and more towns in Vermont that are doing that. Dorset just put in place something in their zoning ordinance that has that's fairly reasonable, pretty level-headed with respect to short-term rentals and registering those, which I can send out to you. But so that's just an aside to address that issue.
In an effort to get a bigger picture of, at least from the landlord side of things, does this area have, and forgive me because I'm just going to put it in air quotes, like a landlord coalition or a landlord association or anything like that, where all the landlords come together like once a month and, no, right?
No.
No, you'd be shocked. There may be an informal one, but there's not a formal.
Right, so like landlord A might call landlord C one day and say, how do you handle this? But there's no like organized landlord association.
There's a Vermont Landlords
There
Association.
is a Vermont, but not like a local.
Victoria, to your point, there's also a lot of and other sources, so those are just the things to take into
Yeah,
consideration. My landlord lives in New Jersey, but we have TPW.
Right.
Okay, so we've got a half an hour left. I want to, and there's nothing wrong with stopping early if we're done, obviously. But I think we've touched on resource possibilities, which was the next agenda item. Obviously, it's great to have town staff involved. It's wonderful to have Gordon's expertise on the group. It's wonderful to have two legislators and their knowledge of the various programs, as Kath was discussing before, from VHFA, VHCB, and DHCD. We also have our own regional planning commission, and they are ready to help, and they're very, very reasonably priced. But they have a lot of inside knowledge. And I've already been talking to Bill Colvin about possible ways in which they could assist this group.
One of the ways, since you brought up the Regional Planning Commission, one of the ways I was wondering if they could help us is updating any of the data that was in the report, since much of that data was pre-COVID. I was wondering, they're a data powerhouse, and I'm wondering if they could help update some of the data that was in some of the reports that you shared, especially since COVID has much of that reporting and the data in those reports were pre-COVID.
The answer is yes.
I thought so.
They can. The answer is yes for a price.
Right. I mean, I get it. I work with regional planning too.
You know, talking about the town paying for that money involves a little bit more complicated.
Right. They're not going to give it for free.
But it is pretty vital because the changes, because we're living in a different world than we were pre-COVID. In the real estate industry, it's a completely different world. Really major changes.
Yep.
So those statistics are very dated.
I think we could probably each go through the data points that are in some of those reports and prioritize the data that we would like updated, and then they could give us a proposal as to how much it would cost to get the data we're looking for. But it wouldn't be any different than asking another consultant. They would charge us also for that data.
I was just going to comment, Phil, about a question you asked earlier about affordability, and I went to Seth Leonard's report while we're sitting here kind of looking at Vermont income levels at the 80%, 100%, and costs of rents those folks could afford in regards to including their utilities. And, you know, I think, you know, when you look at Manchester in particular, and that we're a tourism destination, and in that we have a lot of service employees that work in this area, and they work here, but they don't live here. Probably 90% of them don't. That's whether it's your retail associates in all the stores and the shops, whether it's, you know, room attendants that work in our various lodging establishments. We can't even attract those folks to come and work here because the distance to travel here is so far. And those folks, you know, if they're lucky, you know, are making, you know, $20 an hour, and a lot of them have families, some of them are single, and I think that range of trying to find affordability, especially on the rental side of the business, is really key for us. And I don't think it fits the mold of what the state has reported whatsoever.
Over 30 is the threshold per hour that people are trying to get to. I know that you didn't want public comment, but I moved here in 2019 from upstate New York, living in a 9-unit building in Clifton Park with my kids, one of 25 in Clifton Park in that complex. And it was great for the time being. It was actually what we needed. But I'm a single mother with 2 kids. One just graduated BVA. My daughter is a senior at BVA right now. She's also carrying a full college course load with CCV. Our lease ends at the end of April. I pay $1,900 a month at our current property. I was paying $1,800 a month when I moved here 3 years ago. In addition, we do not have sewer, water, and all of those things. So as a single parent, I work approximately 60 hours a week with a goal of between $80,000 and $95,000 a year to provide for my children with all the expenses here with utilities. We are now looking at where my daughter is going to graduate high school from because I can't find a rental in town for under $4,500. The goal was to be able to hopefully move up to Bromley in the condos. That's why I started coming here, and that was ideal. My home is going on the market on Route 30, and my landlords are phenomenal people, but we have the potential to stay in the house and turn what is a bare antique shop into a 1-bedroom apartment, which would be sober living if you're living with me. And we have no way of doing that. So I came today to get information, but I'm also openly volunteering my time. I work at many of the nonprofits here in town that are looking for housing for their folks. And I had to start Your Kitchen Mistress and cooking on the side just as a supplemental income to try to keep all of this together. So I hope that somebody hears those of us now and then gets ready to turn those shovels. But you know, we're eager to stay. But when you talk about what's needed, people are not making $30 an hour. I'm lucky if I can get my going rate of $45 an hour, and everybody wants to pay me $20, $25 an hour. So when we're looking at families that have 2 incomes, it's fortunate if both people are making $24 an hour and you haven't even taken healthcare into consideration. Secondary, I work in...
I need to cut you off at that point, okay?
There's a lot of...
Because we got to get our business done. If you'd like to come up and speak more at the end, that's great. Okay.
On the subject of resources, is there any role Habitat for Humanity to play in this? Because they build single-family residences. They find the property somehow. They have a lot of volunteer labor. They can get materials at good cost. I wonder if they would be interested in like taking a property that needs repair and turning it into a low-cost rental, because that fits their vision. You know, I find in my life the majority of businesses, capitalist businesses operating for profit, don't take into consideration the human cost of anything. It's just profit or loss. Whereas Habitat for Humanity, started by Jimmy Carter, takes a different approach. Their primary concern is the human cost of housing. So I was just wondering maybe if they could be, we could mutually help them, or they could help us, or maybe that's not possible, I don't know.
Can I just say hello? I am the executive director of Habitat for Humanity, so that's why I'm here, because I want to figure out how we can partner, because this is what we do.
Excellent.
Great. Yeah, we'd love to hear it afterwards.
I've just got one thought. So we've got 20 minutes left, and I think it's super important that we allow time at the end for public comment. And one item I'd like to put on a future agenda is identifying community partners that we need to make sure we're working with. So we need to elect our officers and set our future meeting times, and then allow time for folks to speak. So maybe we need to roll forward with those agenda items so we don't leave this meeting without those important things done.
I am fine with skipping the last piece of this around updates. I was hoping that Cap Briers would be here to talk about housing environment. I would like Seth to talk about his new bill. I know it's not that far along at this point, but it would be good to get a synopsis of it. I mean, we've read about it in the paper, but I think it's important to hear about it quickly from you.
So the bill that I put together over the summer and fall, working with a large group of stakeholders, is designed to make it easier to build in downtowns. It does, it it would require the municipalities with their sewer and water allow at least 4 units an acre, 5 units an acre, and that allows multifamily housing of fourplexes. It also does a couple of other things that I won't go into now to sort of, I'll go into one of them. There's a provision in it called the by right provision, and it means BY, not BUY, by right provision, which means that if you are allowed, for instance, 5 units an acre, that can't be whittled down by neighbors objecting. And if you're allowed 5, you get 5, period. And the zoning board can't change that. It also says that anywhere in the state of Vermont, you can build a single-family home, you can build a duplex. Because why not? One foundation, one driveway, one set of services. Why on earth would you not allow a duplex wherever you allow a single-family home? You get twice as many opportunities. And there's other enforcement provisions and anti-discrimination provisions that involve the Attorney General's office. But those are the key provisions. It is the core of the Senate bill. Senator Hinsdale took my bill with my blessing, by the way, and made it the centerpiece of her bill in the Senate. And leadership has decided that housing is starting in the Senate. So the irony is that my bill, H68, we will see it in the House for the first time when it comes over from the Senate. But that's totally fine. All that matters is that we get it done.
Yep.
So that is not without controversy, as you might imagine. But it's frankly what I believe honestly needs to happen.
A commentary, I mean, fortunately, the zoning ordinance in Manchester, to clear up confusion that has been circulating, accommodates your bill very nicely without, overriding, so to speak, our own zoning ordinance.
Yeah, so I'm glad you raised that, because a lot of communities are already moving in this direction. Some are already there. And what this is really doing is, rather than having take 20 years for it to get there, get it done. It's because it's really just, the movement started, this is just like, get it done.
Right.
Because we got the money now that Ed was talking about. And this is not even a once in a lifetime, it's once every 3 lifetime opportunities. And we've got to clear the decks and make it possible to build the housing in the right places. And building it in the right places is critical.
Good.
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Hey, Gordon, could you update us on the larger parcels of land and their current ownership, and any observations you have? Just take a couple of minutes to do that.
Sure. I guess I've got one comment just before we start there, that, when we're talking about Manchester in this context, we're only talking about Manchester Center. We're not talking about the village. They've got their own zoning, their own rules, although Seth's bill, as I understand it, would have a big effect on them. And I wonder if this group shouldn't consider having somebody from the village here, because we're really talking about the whole community. We are one town. It's just that we happen to have the center and the village as far as zoning is concerned. But that doesn't have to be decided today. I just throw that out there. So when we're talking about properties, I'll start by saying that the town owns the property that probably everybody knows, the Depot Street properties, which are where J. Crew is. It's between the 2 shopping centers, between the Price Chopper Plaza and what I'll call the Starbucks Plaza, right next door to Manchester House of Pizza. There are 3 buildings there. Each one is about 6,000 square feet, and then there's some land behind it. I think it's about, even though the GIS map says something about 1.3 something acres, it's really about 1.8 acres. There's some clerical error there that I haven't been able to correct. The town owns that, and we've been looking at that long and hard for the possibility of some larger housing. Maybe as 30, 40 units, but it depends. And we've put out an RFP. We're waiting to see if anybody responds and what we might be able to do with that. The town also owns a large piece of property off of Airport Road, So you go by the gym and kind of back behind there along the former airport, the airstrip, there's 60 acres of land back in there. Now, right now, it's currently used by the Land Rover Experience, or whatever that's called. They use quite a bit of it. That's a big piece of property. It borders the highway. That has potential, but there right now is no sewer up there. So that's a pretty big expansion and extension to get up to that area. But long range, that's a goal. Now, as I said earlier, we've been trying to work on expanding the sewer basically from Cemetery Road, where the library is, all the way out here. If we can do that, then there's quite a bit of housing potential. Bill Dronzik has a development already under construction. There are 20 units going in there. Some are duplexes, some are single homes. That's a private development. The town has nothing to do with that. We don't control the pricing. I have every reason to believe that he started off with the intention of getting a certain price range, and because of the price of construction, he's not going to be able to do it, unless he does so just out of the pure goodness of his heart. But we'll see what happens. I think there's about 5 that have been built so far, and he's still working on that. Directly across the street from that development is another piece of property that's 6 acres of land. Now, that recently traded, and the title owner is Shelburne Capital Partners, and I think I've heard that the plan is housing, but I don't know anything more. I don't know what his intentions are with that property. That sits right north of the Northshire Day School and just south of the Vermont Country Store. It's in a perfect location. That's serviced by sidewalk. We would have water and sewer. It's great for housing.
That's the old Zoltec?
The old Zoltec property. Now, really, it's Shelburne Capital Partners, and I don't know who all of the investors are in that property. Again, we don't control that. I have heard housing is under consideration, but I can't swear to that. There's another piece of property right behind, actually, I guess what you'd think of as, the Northshire Medical Center. The access comes right near where the little church is, just down the road from us, down south of us. It goes back, and it's a pretty large piece of property, but realistically, there's about 5.5 acres of land that's developable, because there's then a steep hill, and you go down to the river, and that borders the rec park. That, I know, is also planned for housing. What kind of housing, I'm not sure. It's actually really nice, and you could access it by walking out of the back here. We actually connect with it.
Is that privately owned?
It's privately owned. I know it's planned for housing. I'm not sure how many units are really proposed, and I don't know the price range. That might be a higher-end development than the 20 units being built down, but that may change, depending on a lot of things. This developer has a lot of other projects. He may change. Who knows? But it's actually really lovely back there, and when he first told me about it, I thought that's got to be a dump back there. It's beautiful. There also, of course, is another piece of property up here that people have talked about for years. It's technically owned by William E. Daley. It's the driving range. I mean, that is a 16-acre field, flat. It's going to be very close to where the water and sewer come. That has potential. I mean, right now, again, it's private property. They can do what they want with it. But that is a huge piece of property that would be, again, accessed water and sewer, and sidewalk comes pretty close to it. But it would certainly have easy access to Riley Rink and the rail trail and walkability to the rec center and to MIMS and public transportation. All of that is there. Those are really the main ones that have access to water and sewer. Now, another one that's privately owned, that's right in the middle of town, and again, we don't control these properties. I have had discussions with the owners, and they are interested in housing. But maybe partnering with somebody to build some housing. And that's on a road called Cone Road. Now, 99% of the people have no idea where that is. But if you went directly behind Ralph Lauren, where Grubb's Tires was, there's a road there. It looks like a driveway, but that goes back, and there's about 6 acres of land back there. There are a number of apartment buildings that are older. They're not in terrible shape, but they're older. There's a lot of land there that has the potential to be developed. Shires Housing has looked at that with me, and they thought it was an interesting property. But again, we don't own that. So, but I do know that the Haubens own it through a series of different LLCs. But they do own it, and they have interest in cooperating and helping build some housing. But that would be an early discussion.
Okay.
That has water and sewer access. It has the potential for access directly to Main Street, and not just on these back roads. There is a right-of-way that comes down kind of by where Little Rooster Cafe is, that you wouldn't know was there, but it is there. And that could really be an interesting property. So those are the main ones. Obviously, I haven't said anything about anything in the village because we don't control that as well. Those are the ones that I know of. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least talk about the Inn at Willow Pond, which, again, I wish we controlled it, but we don't. And a common refrain I hear is, how come the town hasn't built housing out there? Because we don't own the property. It's not ours. It's private property. We have encouraged them. We've done everything we can to get them moving along. I just don't quite understand what's happening.
I've had extensive conversations with John Smith, the consultant there, and it's a no-go at this point for a variety of reasons. So I can update the grids. I don't think it's relevant to this right now, but I can update you with what I know anyway.
Well, that doesn't have water and sewer from the town, and
it would
that's
be
one of the problems.
It would be an adaptive reuse issue as well. So that limits the number of units. But
is there any water and sewer that runs like in front of the rec out that way, like up 30?
No.
Okay. Never mind.
Not yet.
I was thinking of Donnie Doors, like.
Well, that's another that's another issue.
I know.
And there have been some discussions. I've had some discussions with the attorney he uses about that land, but maybe for a different reason. But
fair.
Donnie's doing a lot of estate planning, and you never know.
Okay, I think we need to move on to elections. We'll skip the other minor items here, and you folks can always address them at some other point.
I'll move it along, and I'll nominate Ed Morrow as the chair of the...
Oh, no,
Well, I don't think it should be a town employee.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Okay, so the floor is open for nominations for chair.
I can't do it.
All right, then I nominate young Mr. Hoffman here.
Second.
Third.
All right. Okay, so any discussion around that?
Good idea.
Not for me.
Do you accept?
I accept. I appreciate that.
Seth?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm not done with, no, I was moving it. I was jumping the gun.
Oh, okay.
On the next one.
Well, is everybody okay with a verbal vote here? We don't have to do secret ballots or anything? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it carries.
Congrats.
Congratulations, Mr. Hoffman. Now we need to get you a vice chair so that you can escape the room from time to time.
Can you be a vice?
The floor is open for nominations for vice chair.
I know.
Seth?
Oh, whoops. I don't want it. I would nominate Melanie.
Yeah.
Okay, Melanie? Do we have a second?
Second?
Third,
Okay. Could you just get down the, who's doing the second and third and first and second?
A little bit too late, but you nominated our esteemed chair.
No, oh, no.
Who's the first and second on?
Okay.
I
Gordon.
nominate.
And I seconded, did other people second?
Yeah, we just need.
I'll just put down me. Okay. Melanie, who nominated Mel?
Seth.
Seth.
Okay. And we have a second?
Victoria.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Okay. All right. And any discussion around Melanie being vice chair? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Melanie, you are it. The chair with all the vices. All right. Now we need a secretary/clerk. Doesn't really matter what it's called. Do we have any nominations for secretary?
Can I
I
nominate?
nominate Victoria.
Me too.
I'm sorry?
I nominate Victoria.
Okay,
Second.
Melanie, okay.
I am so honored.
Victoria.
It is an honor.
Okay, we have a second for Victoria as the...
Second.
Okay,
I also
Gordon?
nominate you.
Nobody's, I'm not doing
Any discussion around Victoria being our illustrious secretary?
Now it's an illustrious secretary.
Sorry,
comfortable doing that?
Who are the nominees?
It was-
and second? Mel?
It was Melanie and then
Okay.
Gordon.
Okay.
Before we finalize
Can we
that,
just-
I just want to let Victoria actually voice her opinion on that.
Yeah, I'm a little busy at work. So if someone can guesstimate, and I get at the first meeting, it's a guesstimate, but a time commitment to this would be
Once a month,
once a month at the least, an hour or two during the month.
hour, an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at your official responsibilities in Robert's rules, but essentially, you need to take the minutes.
Yeah,
You need to circulate them. You need to inform, do public warnings through Leslie's office around meetings.
right, and that was my next, so I could have Leslie's assistance on making sure I meet those deadlines.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to be posted in 3 locations, available for Zoom. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then you're in charge of kind of keeping records, so to speak.
And
So-
I'm assuming we're thinking of like a Google platform for keeping those, much like the
They would go
town
onto
does?
the town's
Yeah.
website, so you would forward your meeting notes, the drafts, and then the finalized ones, and we would get them on the website.
Okay,
And they have to be recorded in the town clerk's office, so it's not your own Google
yes,
site.
but it's on the town.
Yep.
Yep, fine, fair, I accept.
Oh, okay.
I accept all those parameters.
Any other discussion regarding Victoria's nomination? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Thank you,
opposed? Okay, that carries as well. Congratulations to the 3 of you.
Thank you.
We have 2 minutes left, and I think we probably, if there are folks that need to or want to do a little bit of testimony up here, I invite you to do that. Please keep it brief because people have to get back to their schedules.
Phil, we
What
need to set our next meeting,
You
actually,
guys said
before we...
meeting.
Yeah, and what I need to do before we hit 1:30 is I need a nomination to extend the meeting time. So if you're okay with extending it, even if you can't stay, individuals can't stay, I'd like to extend it before we hit 1:30, another 15 minutes.
Okay.
So moved.
So,
Okay? So Kath, who seconded it?
Victoria,
Victoria, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? All right, we're extended 15 minutes. Any other business that you folks need to talk about up here?
We should set our next meeting
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a time that typically works best for folks?
You and Kath?
So
I guess, yeah, maybe you guys have the...
Seth and I have such a weird life. So when the legislature is in session, which is January through May,
Okay.
we are up in Montpelier every Tuesday through Friday. We could zoom in to an evening meeting, Seth,
At 5
on Wednesdays.
on Wednesday or Thursday, I guess we can't do it Tuesday.
Yeah. So if folks are looking for an evening time, for the next couple months, Seth and I could zoom in on Wednesdays and or Thursdays, with Wednesdays probably being better. And then strangely enough, when the legislature is not in session, then we're back home. So,
The alternative is Monday, but late afternoon it would have to be.
I can't.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I could do noon on Monday or late afternoon. So it sounds like zooming in is what it's going to have to be for.
I just think the noon time is, people can't get here, members of the public can't come at noon on Mondays, I don't think. So I would be pushing for an evening time when folks can get here.
Is there any Wednesday in particular, like the third Wednesday, the fourth Wednesday, the first Wednesday? It's just that Wednesdays work?
Yeah, Wednesdays at 5 or 5:30, I guess. Right?
Yeah?
Yep.
These going to be held?
5:30, actually, now that I think of it. I guess.
5:30.
Well, we also have to make sure that there's not a conflict with other
Select board.
select board, planning commission, zoning board meetings. Does anybody have them on Wednesdays, or are they on Tuesdays?
It all depends.
Yeah,
So you'll have to give a date and we'll look at the calendar.
yeah.
We're good. You can, whatever people want to do on any Wednesday.
Okay. So maybe a couple weeks from now on March 8th, John's suggesting, so.
Or March 1st, either
Or
one.
March 1st? Is there a, I'm thinking initially, maybe we meet on a slightly more frequent cadence, just to kind of get things rolling and kind of lay out an initial plans, but what do other people think?
Good idea.
March 1?
March 1 sounds good.
March 1? Okay. Is that
At
something that's
5:30.
held here, or is that just exclusively Zoom, or what, I guess,
That's
what does
up
that
to you
work for
guys.
people, I guess?
Just on the Wednesday nights for the next couple months, Seth and I will be joining by Zoom,
Okay.
but,
Generally, whoever can make it, get their body here, that's what we encourage. And then if people are on Zoom,
There's other meetings on March 1st,
Yeah.
so you'll have to choose a different day.
Yeah, how about March 8th?
No, March 8th.
March 8th should work.
March 8th.
Could you, Leslie, could you check 2 Wednesdays for March 8th? I'm just thinking, Jed, if you just said more frequently.
That would be the 22nd.
Yeah, so the first and third Wednesdays of the month don't work.
Okay.
Okay.
There's other meetings in here
Yeah, perfect.
with a conflict.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So we're saying March 8th and March 26th?
22nd.
22nd, thank you.
Yeah, those would be the 2 Wednesdays.
At what time?
5:30.
5:30.
5 o'clock?
5:30.
Sorry, what was it, 5:30?
5:30.
Okay. Does that work for you? This one? Okay.
And you and I will catch up, Judd, concerning
22nd.
reporting back or being at the planning commission, updating the planning commission. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Do we want to set some sort of agenda between now and then, or, okay. Maybe previously sent out an agenda with the things that we missed that we maybe want to either think about, or things that we've talked about today that
Sure.
could be,
It makes sense to kind of level set, since this is a business meeting, in order to get into the stuff by perhaps revisiting some of these things and covering some things that you didn't cover.
yeah. Okay.
So Jed is doing that, so you're sending out an agenda?
Yeah, I will send out an agenda. And in addition to whatever comes out in that agenda, maybe just revisiting some of the documentations and things that were sent out, and just trying to reconsider also our kind of mission and vision for what we're going to be accomplishing. And maybe for the next meeting, we can also have a bigger discussion around like some different areas that we're targeting, or what we're really looking to do. And
Right.
yeah, we just got opinions on what could be best for town.
Good. Anything else from the task force? I should mention the last thing that I wanted to say was, I call this a task force, not a commission, not a committee, because it has the urgency and it has the near-term importance of achieving something, not to put any pressure on the group, of achieving something with at least a vision as to when, as to a timeline, very generally. And a task force is not a standing committee. We don't intend this to be a standing committee at this point, because I think what we're trying to do is address an urgent and acute need. And at some point, it may be, once you're further down the line, it may be appropriate to, for the select board to approve it becoming a standing commission or committee. But that's the reason I named it a task force, because it perhaps may have a life and death with the work that you've done having been done, but then any legacy work being continued through either a standing group on housing or some other group. So just wanted to get that explanation on the table.
Make sure we leave time for
Yes.
public comment.
So we would invite anybody who wants to come up to the podium. Please state your name and who you're representing or what you're representing.
Hi, I'm Cindy Luce. I'm the Executive Director at Habitat for Humanity. Been in that role about 4 months, so I've seen some of you at other events, and look forward to partnering and really figuring this out, because I know Manchester, well, the whole county has, and the state has a housing problem or an issue that we want to kind of be partner and help with. And, we do it one house at a time, but I'm really encouraged. I don't know, Seth or Kat, if you guys have visited or been part of the project in Montpelier that is downtown. If not, I would love for you to visit it to kind of report back.
Great.
Because I know there's a project that's downtown in Montpelier that Habitat is part of, but like they're only responsible for like 20 units, but it's a really big project. So I'm not sure. I'm going to get some more information and I'll share it with the group, because I'm really excited about that thought process and how that all works, because we are all about owning, and I'm curious how they are doing it there in Montpelier with this whole project. So it's a nice way to think about it.
Definitely. Please send that, because we can go and get eyes on.
Okay.
Take pictures and find out
Yeah.
more. So.
Yeah. So okay, but keep me in the loop. You can find me. I'm just.
Thanks very much for attending. Yeah. Anybody else like to come up to the podium? Okay. Well, in that case, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Okay. Seconded. Any discussion about adjourning?
No.
Hopefully not. All right, all in favor?
Aye.